Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Oxford Business Insight podcast. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce Lucius Cary of Oxford Technology to you. Hello, Lucas.
Hello.
And we're going to be talking about a career spanning several decades, but culminating in investing in some fascinating science and technology businesses. But it started in a rather different way. We're literally going to talk about Margaret Thatcher, burger bars, and a several $100 million protein play. So, Lucius, welcome along, and
Uh,
please tell us how it all started. Give us the early parts of your career because that is really fascinating.
Okay, so I after school I did an apprenticeship, an engineering apprenticeship at the Atomic Energy Research establishment, and then I went to Oxford and I read engineering, and then during my time at Oxford I changed my mind a bit. I was doing a thick sandwich course, so I was meant to do 1 year of engineering practice, which I loved doing at Harwell. Then there was the university, and then I was meant to go back and do another year after that. And but I thought that then that England was very good at producing engineering. We're very innovative. We've got a long history of being very creative, and we've got more Nobel Prizes per capita than anybody else, or at least at the time that was true. I think it's no longer quite true now. But we are very creative, but we haven't been good at creating businesses. We've got very few world-class businesses.
Yeah.
And so at the time, I believed that there was a sort of mystery to business, and I wanted to try to sort of find out what it was. So
Okay.
I went to see my apprentice masters and I said, look, I think it would be a waste of my time and also the country's money because they were paying me to
Yeah.
become an even better, engineer. And what I'd like to do is try and, learn something about business. And in particular, I'd like to go to a business school. And they said, well, all right, if you can get into a business school, we will release you from your indentures because I'd signed up to pay for this to do this extra year. And so then I went to Harvard Business School,
Mhm.
and it sounds paradoxical, but what I learned at Harvard was that there is nothing to learn. You know, right, it's running a business is all common sense.
Yeah.
You have to have good products, you have to, or services, you have to keep them up to date, you have to motivate your people so that they're happy, you have to keep the finances in control and raise money, you've got to market your products. Not that it's easy to do any of these things, but at least you know what you're trying to do is fairly straightforward. And anyway, so when and I enjoyed Harvard a lot, and when I came back from Harvard, I I I I sent a letter to Mr. Hanson, as he was then, later Lord Hanson, and I said, Mr. Hanson, I think you've got a very good management style, and I think you're going to be very successful, and I'd like to come and work for you. And I don't care what you pay me, but I'd like to be in charge of something. And if I do it well, I expect to be promoted. And if I do it badly, you can sack me. Because what I knew about myself at the time was that I was a natural doer and
Yeah.
not an advisor. I wanted to do stuff and not to advise other people how to do stuff. And Hanson said, "Yo, that's great. You're just the chap for me. You're hired." So I turned up to work for him, and he sent me to the agricultural division where I reported to the chairman of the division,
Mhm.
and it was a complete disaster. He he viewed me as a spy from head office,
Right.
and I was spent my time making recommendations about this or looking at new ideas or moving a factory from A to B and doing stuff, and I had no authority to carry anything out. It's exactly what I didn't want to do. And so after about 6 months, I rang up Hanson. I said, "Can I come and see you in London?" And he said, "Yeah." So I went up to see him in London. I said, "Look, this is just not working." I said, "Either the divisional chairman must go or I better go." And he said, "Well, I think on the whole, you'd better go." So that was the end of my uh, first and, as it turned out, only job.
Right.
So, so then I thought, well, I'm obviously sort of not employable, so I'd better try and start my own business. and I'd borrowed money to pay for my education, so I was in debt. And I owed £3,000 at the time, equivalent to about £30,000 today. And also, I really wanted to start an engineering business, but I didn't think I'd be able to raise enough money to start an engineering business. Because to do that, you have to, get a plant, you have to get machinery, you have to, you know, develop a product, you have to sell it, you have to produce it, you deliver it, and then you wait to be paid.
Yeah.
All a lot of capital, and I didn't think I'd have a realistic hope of
Yeah.
raising all that. Also, I didn't have an idea. And so I thought I would start an American hamburger restaurant, a slightly unlikely sort of thing for me to do. But it was in the days before McDonald's had
Yeah.
come, and I thought it would be a wide open market and the product would go well. And so I wrote a business plan, and I reckoned I needed £27,000 to start this
Yeah.
business. So at that point, I was the archetypal young entrepreneur. I had a business plan in one hand, needing £27,000. I had nothing to contribute myself other than my overdraft. And so my problem was how to raise money, a problem which is faced by tens of thousands of people every
Yeah.
year. And so the first thing I did was to go and see my bank, and they actually quite helpfully offered to increase my overdraft from 3,000 to 4,000.
Yeah.
So I had something to contribute, not a
Yeah.
material amount, but a sort of psychologically important, maybe, amount. And there were only two venture capital companies in the UK at the time, ICFC, now called 3i,
Yeah.
and the Small Business Capital Fund. This was 1972.
Yeah.
The Small Business Capital Fund, which was set up in the wake of the Bolton Report in the mid-60s. Anyway, so I went to see both of them, and they both turned me down after 20-minute meetings. Too young, never run a business before, blah, blah, blah. So then I put an advertisement in the Financial Times, and the advertisement said, entrepreneur seeks £26,000 to start business. That was the
Right.
27,000 less the 1,000 the bank were lending me. Estimated value to investor after 66 months, £237,500.
Right.
And that was quite an expensive advertisement.
Yes.
And also, the Financial Times refused to publish it. And I had to get, in fact, my father's solicitor, who I never even met, to vouch for my character. I thought, oh
That's
my
an
God,
advert.
the whole world is just so, full of obstacles to actually trying to start a business. Anyway, the ad was published, and I had 16 people answered the ad, of whom six were trying to sell me more
Right.
advertising. The
Some things
10,
don't change.
yeah, but 10 people who today would be called business angels,
Yeah.
the term did not then exist,
Yeah.
but 10 people contacted me and said, oh, this looks interesting, tell me more. So I sent them all a copy of my business plan. And then the first one rang me up and said, this looks interesting. Let's have lunch in a pub.
Yeah.
I went to have lunch in a pub with him, and there was another person there as well who wasn't interested. And it was the summertime, and it was a very unsatisfactory meeting. We fetched our drinks, and then we talked a bit about the cricket, and then we, talked a little bit about the business, and then we fetched our food, and, it all felt hopeless. And at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I rang him up and I said, look, that went really badly, and I'm sure you're not going to invest in me. And he said, you're quite right. I'm just writing you a letter. And I said, but can I come and see you again and do it properly? And he said, all right, come to breakfast.
Right.
A couple of days later, I turned up in his house and nobody else there. And we talked about the business for 3 hours.
Right.
And at the end of that time, he offered to invest £5,000 in the business on the terms that I was suggesting. And the terms that I was suggesting were that I would put in my £1,000 that the bank was lending me for shares, and the investors would put in £999 for shares.
Right.
I would own just the majority.
Yeah.
And then the investors would put in £25,000 as a loan secured against the assets of the business, but not guaranteed by me.
Okay.
So the effect of that structure was if the business failed, I would lose £1,000, which would have been, difficult but not life-threatening, and the investors would lose £25,000, £26,000. If the business went well, then the first profits would be used to repay the investors
Yep.
their loan with some interest paid in the form of directors' fees, which was
Yep.
tax efficient. And then after that, we'd split the profits 50-50.
Okay.
So that seemed like a fair deal to me and
Yep.
this investor, since he agreed to invest on those terms. And I didn't know it then, but I certainly know it now. That is called having a lead investor.
Right.
And once you've got an investor who's agreed to invest in a business on agreed terms,
Yep.
not because they're your father or your friend or something,
Yep.
but purely because they think it's a good commercial proposition, suddenly everything gets real.
Yep.
And so then I wrote to the other people who'd answered my ad, and I said, look, this all, I've got my first investor now, the train is leaving the station. If you want to get on board, get a move on.
Yep.
And quite quickly I was oversubscribed.
Oh, very good.
I had more people wanting to invest than I had room for. So I took the two investors for £8,000 and two investors for £5,000. So I had four investors, and then I had the money to start the business. I then had to find a site, which was in Bristol, and I knew nobody at all in Bristol. So I found digs, and I lived on a mattress at the top of a fire escape for 2 years and opened this restaurant. And I did everything myself. It was open 7 days a week, 14 hours a day. I scrubbed the floor, cooked the food, employed the waitresses, paid the wages, did everything. It was very hard work. But I learned a lot very
Sure you did.
quickly about the practicalities of running a business. And after about a couple of years, we had enough money in the bank to pay for a second restaurant.
Right.
The first restaurant took a long time to get going. I had to give away 10,000 free meals in the end to get people to come because nobody knew what an American hamburger was at that time. But whatever it was, 50% of people who came liked it and came back.
Yep.
So it grew. After 5 years anyway, there were three restaurants in the chain. The business was profitable. There were about more than 50 people employed, and it was all quite successful. And by that time, each restaurant had its own manager, so I had an income and time.
Yep.
And so then, looking back at the difficulty I had raising capital, I mean, I'd been to Oxford University, I'd been to Harvard Business School, and yet I couldn't,
Yep.
couldn't raise capital. And if the first person had not read my tiny little advertisement, which was also quite expensive, probably the whole thing wouldn't have happened.
Right.
It just seemed to me the whole method, of raising capital in the UK was very bad. And so I decided to do something about that, or try to do something about it. And so I started this magazine called Venture Capital Report. And the idea of the Venture Capital Report, it was a monthly publication, and it contained articles about the entrepreneurs and the projects for which they were seeking capital. And unlike my little ad, which was just 2 lines long, this would be a detailed 5-page or 6-page article, and you'd have a description of the product, an
Yep.
analysis of the market and competition, a CV of the founder with photographs, a cash flow projection, a suggested equity structure, and a name and address and telephone number. And it would be sold on subscription to investors, and that would be some guarantee for the entrepreneurs seeking capital that the people who were seeing their plan were, at
Yep.
least serious to the point
Yep.
at which they'd pay something. And the first issue of that was in December 1978. And then, then I had a bit of luck because in April 1979, Mrs. Thatcher was elected. And she was on the same tack that I was on. She was trying to make England a more enterprising place.
Yep.
where people could raise money and start businesses. So the Cabinet Office subscribed to Venture Capital Report, and she used to invite me to Downing Street to meet her chancellors. And she'd say, now you listen to this man, meaning me. And I would tell the chancellors the kind of practical problems that there were
Yeah.
when you were actually trying to do something. And so that led to various government schemes to try to improve things. So there was the business startup scheme and the
Yeah.
loan guarantee scheme and um, the business expansion scheme and all those things.
Yeah.
Anyway, after and Venture Capital Report eventually ran for 25 years, and it was the first of the Business Angels network. There are now lots of business angel networks, and they mainly happen online. But this was obviously before
Yeah.
that era, so it was all on paper, and it did work quite well. I mean, about 15% of the things we published actually raised the money they sought,
Right. Well.
or all the money they sought, and about 30% got some interest and some money.
Yeah.
But by 1983, that's to say after Venture Capital Report had been running for 5 years, it became clear that scientists just couldn't raise money at all. And
Yeah.
when we wrote up quotes unquote ordinary businesses, so restaurants or hotel developments or golf courses or property developments or something, they would get inquiries and quite often raise their money.
Let's ask a question though, Lucy.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
were
yeah.
you going out to see whether it was a golf course or another restaurant chain or whatever? Who was going out and writing up that report?
Oh, I wrote it up.
So you were effectively the investigative journalist, for want of a
Yes,
better
yes. It's
description. Yeah.
incredibly hard work.
Yeah.
So I used to see, every day I would see people in the morning,
Yeah.
uh, and for 3 or 4 hours often, and having read their business plan,
Yeah.
and then I would do other stuff, and then at 5 o'clock I would start writing, and it was all by hand,
Yeah.
and I'd write up the article, and then the next day it got typed up,
Right.
and then I would proofread it, and then it got sent to the entrepreneur
Yeah.
in so that they could approve it because we were
Yeah.
wanting to do it for them. And then we would, typeset it and print it and mail it out.
Yeah.
It was very hard work. It was a labor of love. It never really made any money. It just about covered its costs, but it was
Yeah.
was very hard
No, I can
work.
imagine that's hard work. Sorry to
No,
interrupt.
no, no, that's fine. And anyway, but it became clear after 5 years that scientists just couldn't raise money at all. They didn't even get any inquiries, let alone raise any money. And when I thought about it, the reasons were very obvious. And the reasons are that most investors don't understand science.
Yeah.
Very sensibly, people don't like to invest in what they don't understand. So, and I'm a scientist. My background's in science and engineering, and those were the things in which I was particularly interested. So then, in 1983, I was in the offices of a venture capital company, and I said to them, it's no wonder this country is going to the dogs. You useless VCs who put your money in management buyouts and asset-backed ventures and already profitable businesses, but whenever anybody comes up with a real idea, you will run a mile. And they said, look, I tell you what, they said, if we give you £125,000, would you like to invest in 5 things, 5 of these wild
Yeah.
startup, £25,000 each, and shut up? So I said, okay, you're on. So that was the beginning of what I've done ever since.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That
And
really
so
goes back to 1983. You said.
1983, yeah, exactly. So my first investment was in 1983, £25,000 in this startup. And it was a huge success. It was a real stroke of luck.
Hmm.
The people who put up the money, the venture capital company, they got £500,000 back
Wow.
after a couple of years for their £25,000 investment. And the founder of this business became a multimillionaire, and he became my biggest investor.
Oh,
So
okay.
it was a really good kind of thing. So that then enabled me to raise a second fund and then a third and a fourth. And we're currently investing, I think it's the 12th fund,
Right.
now taking advantage of the SEIS scheme,
Yeah.
which is absolutely perfect for investing in startups. I mean, the
Right.
government's just done a brilliant thing there, and I hope they don't change it ever.
Right.
Uh, okay, so that's the sort of you know
The background.
that's the background exactly.
And so your
I
Oxford.
can tell you, I'll tell you one quite interesting story
Oh,
actually. Um, when I was thinking of starting Venture Capital Report,
yeah.
and I was explaining to people, and I was trying to find a few investors in it too, to give it £5,000 is what I reckoned we needed to start it.
Yeah.
And I talked to somebody. They said, "Oh, you can't do this. It's illegal." And I said, "It's illegal. I you can't believe it." And so I went to see a solicitor, and he said, "Yeah, yeah, no, you can't. It's you're not allowed to solicit money. Only stockbrokers can do that, and people who are approved." I thought, well, yeah, that's just ridiculous. It's so anti the culture,
Yeah.
forming business. I'll just do it anyway. So I did. And as you know, Mrs. Thatcher came and the government came, blah, blah, blah. In the late 1980s, the government decided to imitate Venture Capital Report itself.
Right.
And they were going to set up 5 regional things doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And that was quite upsetting to me in a way because they were going to put I think they eventually put 6 million into this,
Yeah.
and I was struggling away working really hard and not making any money, and to add insult to injury they asked me to make the speech to launch this thing, which I did with some reluctance. But anyway, when the government lawyers looked into this, they concluded it was illegal. And so then I had a nice letter from Mr. Heseltine, who was then the president of the Board of Trade in the
Right. Yeah.
cabinet. And it said, "Dear Mr. Cary, we absolutely like what you're doing. It's helping to create enterprise. It's everything we want, but we think it's illegal. And, don't worry about it. We will change the law."
Okay.
And they did. And that is when the concept of the sophisticated investor and
Right.
the high net worth individual came into law.
Okay.
It's just sort of a little sideline.
Yeah. No. But that's really interesting. And did you find Heseltine was quite high profile at that time as president of the Board of Trade. Was he personally, his businessman by background, was he personally important to the development of that culture, do you think?
Well, I mean, I didn't, I don't know, I didn't ever meet him in person. I didn't have any long-term relationship with him, but he
Right.
did write me this, you know, very direct letter
Yeah.
which said, "Look, we like what you're doing, keep on doing it, but we think you're illegal, and we will change the law. Don't worry about it." And which they did. So, that was a step in the right direction.
Interesting. Just
To
one other
begin with,
question.
you weren't allowed to self-certify. You had to get an accountant to certify you. The sort of regulations that still beset us all the
Right.
time. They're just so counterproductive. Most of what the FCA and all these regulations do all the time. So always kind of trying to stop people making risky investments. The
Okay.
other half of the government is giving you 50% tax relief if you do and encouraging you.
Yeah.
So the two arms of government do not at all pull together.
Okay.
Anyway,
Okay. Well, let's talk. I'd like to talk a bit about the seed tech for seed stage for tech or science based
yeah.
investments. Going back to those earlier days when you started doing that, what were some of the challenges more from the people you were investing in? Did they understand business? I understand the investors didn't understand the science or the technology, so were
Yeah.
reluctant to invest. What about the other side of the coin in terms, I can imagine that some of the scientists or engineers that you were dealing with at the time, not many of them might have had a business sense that you had
No,
instead.
no. Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. The people in whom we invest are, are very good scientists. We focus on the science. We try to invest
Yeah,
good science. And we like to invest in things which, if the science works, it'll be a major
yeah,
success. It'll change the world in some
yeah,
significant way. And the scientists concerned may be future Nobel
yeah,
laureates, but they won't have seen a VAT return before or
yeah.
done an
Or the
R&D
payroll or something
claim
like that.
or done a payroll or negotiated a deal with an
Yeah,
American distributor or all those things.
yeah,
So we get actively involved. All our initial investments were within an hour's drive,
yeah,
and the purpose of that is so that we can have frequent meetings, like
yeah,
every fortnight or every month. And we don't like board meetings where
yeah,
the founders have to spend time, writing papers for the board and doing stuff. So
yeah,
we prefer short management meetings.
yeah,
And what we really like is for the entrepreneurs to ring up and say, look, this has just happened. What do you think we should do about this? And we say, oh, we'll come and see you. And 10 minutes later, we're in their
yeah,
office and discuss
yeah.
the problem, whatever it is, or the issue, and hopefully resolve it, before it becomes an issue at all. And so that's very much part of what we do. We get actively involved.
Okay. And from what I know about sort of early stage science based companies, often they've got the product that, as you say, could be world changing, but sometimes that they need to stretch out their network to maybe it's other academic institutions or to big science based or pharmaceutical based companies to get some of the capability to expand it, not necessarily the core
Yes.
science. Do you help with that as well?
Yes, we help in whatever way,
Right.
we can. And in our company, we only have one rule, which is not to have any rules.
Okay.
So we take each case on its merits. We don't have
Okay.
a sort of, a tick list of things to do at all. And and what the way I always say it to the people in whom we invest, one of the big advantages of starting a business, to begin with, by definition, if you're a one-man company, which is most of what we
Yeah.
do, you have to do everything.
Yeah.
You have to do the science, you have to do the marketing, you have to do the sales, But when you employ your second person, you can employ that person to do whatever it is that you least like doing.
Absolutely.
So if you're the sort of person who loves going marketing and going to exhibitions, but you don't like doing the admin and the accounts and the payroll, you can employ somebody to do that.
Yeah.
Or the sort of person who doesn't like, standing on a podium and talking to a room full of people to make sales, and you like just doing the science on the bench and sticking to that, you can employ someone to do the marketing and sales. So you end up with the perfect job for yourself.
Excellent. And so bringing that culture to people in terms of I can see you're active in terms of the way you manage and you genuinely help them grow rather than I've seen situations with some companies where the investors just put in their money, expect the board reports as you say, but don't really contribute much more than that.
Yeah.
That's completely the reverse of your situation. But sort of coming up to date, what do you think are some of the challenges that some of your more recent investments have had to face in recent years? And then I'd like to ask you about some of your long term investment because I know you still work with some people after decades.
Yes.
So tell us about the sort of more recent ones and a little bit about your long term ones.
Uh, okay. Well, we made an investment earlier this year,
Hmm.
which it has the merit of being very easy to understand, and it's a heated stretcher.
Ah, okay.
And when I heard about it, I thought, oh, that is such a good idea. It's like putting a rubber on the end of a pencil.
Yeah.
How come nobody's done that before? But
Okay.
apparently they haven't. And so this stretcher, and the statistics from the Afghanistan war showed that 80% of the people who died, wounded soldiers who died on the battlefield, were hypothermic, and
Right.
hypothermia was a major cause of death.
Absolutely. Good
And you
understanding.
completely understand why. If you've got a battle that's happening in winter with snow on the ground and you get wounded,
Yeah.
you know, it can take hours before you get, you have to get picked up, probably have to get in a helicopter, you have to, then go on a flight, and it can take hours and hours before you get to hospital. And, and hypothermia is a big problem. So
Absolutely.
this stretcher folds up and then it unfolds, and it has a military battery,
Yeah.
and it heats up and keeps you warm.
Excellent.
And when you get to hospital, it's made of X-ray translucent material so that you can have an X-ray without being removed from the stretcher.
That's
So it seems like a wonderful idea. I don't know, I've no idea how it will go yet,
okay.
but the prototypes have now been made, and there have been discussions with the American military are very interested.
Yeah.
Also, the Scandinavian countries are very interested.
Hmm.
Also, Ukraine are very interested. And so we will see what happens. No sales yet.
Yeah.
I would hope in the next 6 months, the first sales, probably for quite small quantities for testing and evaluation,
Yeah.
will happen. And after that, hopefully sales will take off.
Excellent. Well, it sounds like a brilliant idea. And so I know you've worked with some of your early investors for many years. So tell us a
Yes.
little bit about your ongoing relationship with those.
Yes, well, I've got one company in which I first invested in 1987,
Right.
and the investment was £30,000, and it was to build a gas atomizer.
Right.
And gas atomizers are big machines the size of a house, and
Okay.
you melt metal at the top,
Yeah.
and you pour it through a nozzle, and you blast it with supersonic argon, and you create metal powder.
Right.
Then you use that powder for forging materials. So gear wheels in cars, for
Right.
example,
Okay.
100 years ago, they were made by taking a blank of steel and then cutting out in each individual tooth
Right.
on a hobby machine, which takes a long time and is very expensive. Now they're made by injection molding steel
Right.
pipe into a mold, and the gear wheels are more accurate and and stronger.
Yeah.
And anyway, so that and the the idea of this atomizer was to produce high quality powders, which would be used for aerospace applications.
Yeah.
And that I've been a director of that company ever since, and it's now one of the leading manufacturers of these machines, which cost anything up to 5 million
Yeah.
pounds. And it hasn't been a huge commercial success, but it's hasn't needed any more capital. That original
Yeah.
£30,000 is all the money that's been invested, and the demand for powdered metal has been shooting up now. It's been going up steadily for 50 years, but now it's going up
Right.
much faster because of the 3D printing of metals.
Right. Okay.
And they also have developed some technology which will improve, or which has in some cases improved, and may in a lot more cases improve the quality of the powders being produced, which will enable them to be used for applications which are not possible today. Anyway,
And
so
it's still the same management team in place or
yes, yes, it's the founder. When I first invested, I think the founder wasn't married, and he got married very soon after.
yeah.
And I go and stay with him probably every month, and I know his children very well, who are now in their 30s, and it's been a it's been a
Ah,
sort
an
of,
excellent journey.
yeah, so it's a sort of there's an emotional.
Yeah,
uh,
absolutely.
I had a meeting with him yesterday in London, in fact, or two, yeah.
Okay. And so let me ask you something about your business. You've obviously been established. You've got a sort of a niche in terms of science and technology investments. How many how many investments would you typically do in a year, and how many sort of business plans would you have to look at to get to that sort of level?
Well, we get about 1,000 approaches a year from people wanting funds.
Yeah.
We probably 100 of those are possible in the sense that they're new science, and we only
Right.
do science. And then we probably look at 20 in some a little bit of detail,
Okay.
and we make about 5 investments per year.
Okay. So it's sort of
So,
1,000 interest potential, come down to 100, and look at
yes,
20 in detail.
yes,
And if you get 5 investments, that's a good year, sort of thing. And
yes. We will never make an investment just for the sake of making an
yeah,
investment.
right. Okay.
We'd rather wait until there is a good one.
Yes.
So, so I've had periods where, we haven't made a single investment for 9 months.
Yeah.
and then we make three in a week, you know.
Okay. No, I understand that.
Yeah.
Okay. And if terms of do you actively go out and look for investments as well, or is it now you're so well established, you're known that you people come to you or your
They
network?
are, yes, I mean, that's one advantage we have. We are well known
Yeah.
in our little niche.
Yeah.
And we quite often get, I had once, I had a chap in my office and he said, I've written this plan and I want to raise money. And I talked to my bank manager and he said, oh, you should go along and talk to Oxford Technology. And then I talked to my patent agent about filing the patent and I explained we wanted to raise money. He said, oh, you should go and talk to Oxford Technology.
Okay.
And then I talked to my accountant on preparing the business plan and he said, oh, you should go and talk. So here I am.
Yeah. Well, that's good, and I guess time is one of the and reputation to build that reputation takes a little while, but once you do, you get the benefit of not having to go out.
Yeah. And
And
we are absolutely on the side of the people we invest in.
yeah,
So we really for example, we try not to become a director of the companies in which we
right,
invest because there's a lot of responsibility attached to being a director. You know, you
yeah,
get personal liabilities if things go wrong, and so we try not to be an investor, but we usually a director, but we usually have the rights to appoint a director.
right,
Almost the only time we've exercised those rights when the purpose has been to prevent an incoming VC voting the founder off the board and
right.
replacing with somebody else. So we like to stick with our
Okay,
founder.
so
Yeah.
that's good because it must be comforting for the people you invest in. Can we
Yes.
talk a little bit about we talked about sort of government policy and its impact going back into the 80s, chancellors Margaret Thatcher and Michael Heseltine. But you did allude to the fact that the some of the SEIS schemes and things like that are very good schemes. Talk to us a bit about the lie of the land as of today in terms of that the government investment schemes, and
Yeah.
let's assume for the purpose of this conversation that nothing radical is going to change. Is it good, bad, indifferent government policy at the moment?
No, I think the SEIS scheme
Yeah,
is just for the getting businesses started
yeah,
is absolutely perfect. I mean, it could not be better. When I first heard about the scheme, I heard about it, I was actually driving my car and it was announced on the news. And I could not, you actually made a profit. If you invested £100,000 and the business failed,
yeah,
you ended up with £100,500.
yeah,
And, you know, I could not believe it. And I knew the people in the treasury and I rang them up and I said, look, I want to come and see you. You know, and they said, all right, come along. And so I went to see them and I wrote it all down. So if I invest £100,000, you know, I get this much tax relief and then, you know, this happens and I actually make a profit. And they said, yes. And they said, the reason is that George Osborne, who was the chancellor at the time, has decided that the economy is in a mess. And this was 2012 after the
yeah,
sort of fallout of the financial crash. So, you know, you couldn't argue with that. And he said, and the trouble with the UK is that, you know, investors won't invest in new businesses because the risks are too high.
yeah,
You know, they all say, well, you know, it's a bit early for us. Come back when you've got profits, you know, and sales, and then maybe we'll invest. But oh no, we wouldn't invest at the moment. So he said, so you know, and that's what we need. We need new businesses because that's what creates the jobs and employment and prosperity for the
yeah,
future. And so this scheme is going to change the culture. It's going to enable investors to, you know, start investing in all these startups. And it's worked. I mean, you know, it's
yeah,
when you if you were an entrepreneur in the past, you know, raising money for a real startup was really difficult. Whereas now you really can raise money to get
yeah.
started. And so it's been very, very good.
Okay. And do you think there's anything government policy could um, do to help that even further going forward? I mean, you know, the government seems to want growth, but they don't always seem to know how they're going to get it. So,
Yes. Well, I don't really, you know, my view is that the government needs to set the rules, you know, which deliver the the result they want.
yeah,
I mean, one problem, I suppose, if I'm being, you know, slightly picky. I mean, I don't want to. The SEIS scheme is brilliant,
Yeah.
but the trouble is you get the same tax relief for investing in a pizza restaurant
Right.
you do for investing in a science startup.
Okay.
And a pizza restaurant probably has a 95% chance of success.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what a pizza restaurant is. You just follow the formula, you work hard and it'll probably succeed. Whereas, if you're backing a new science business, you've probably got a 5% chance of
Right.
success because there are so many things which can and do go wrong. Patents may not be granted. A big competitor like Google may come up with a similar idea and have millions to put behind it. There are lots and
Yeah.
lots of risks along the way. So investors being very sensible will tend to, they'll go for the pizza restaurant as opposed to
Yeah.
risk science startup. And I mean, we've had some, very big successes. We've been, quite lucky in some ways, and but it's still, the math says that what we do should work
Yeah.
because the losses on the failures get hugely reduced, and the gains on the winners, if they go well, can be very large, and they're
Yeah.
all tax free. And so far it has worked very well. But we only raise about 400,000 or 500,000 pounds a year,
Yeah.
to invest in these startups, and it's a pitifully small number.
Yeah. And can I ask, in terms of where you have a success story, when companies do start to grow, it does seem to me there's a frustration in a large part of the business community and to an extent in government that they don't seem to know what to do about it. Is how do you get those companies to grow within the UK and rather than being picked off
Ah,
by an international,
yes.
we know the names of
I know.
America.
I mean, I'm afraid that's a cultural issue,
Right.
and I don't know what's to be done about it. I mean, the VC community in the UK is very short term.
Right.
The ideal is you invest in, over a 5 year period, and then you exit over the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's so sad. When the Germans start a business, their idea is to build it up and then leave it to the next generation, who will
Yeah.
then leave it to the next generation. There's a sort of 100 year
Yeah.
timescale. In the UK, the ideal thing is you exit in 10 years,
Yeah.
and then, then whoever buys the company, makes much larger profits every year for the next, 20, 30, 40, 50
Yeah.
years. So who are the mugs?
Yeah.
And then,
Exactly.
I mean, and the government rules, I am afraid, bake in short-termism.
Right.
One huge problem with the SEIS scheme, which is so blindingly obvious, you don't know why nobody in government has sought to fix it, but dividends are taxed.
Yeah.
So you invest in a company under an SEIS scheme, the business does well, 10 years down the line, it's making £3 million a year. Hooray, a great business. Let's pay a dividend. Oh, no, we can't pay a dividend because the angel investors would have to pay tax at 50% or whatever the tax rate is, 45%, whatever. And oh, but if you sell, it's all tax free.
Yeah.
Oh, well, then the pressure to sell is irresistible.
Absolutely. No,
VCTs have no tax on dividends.
yeah.
So VCTs, and they're allowed to invest in already profitable businesses that are floating on AIM, and that's where all the money goes.
Yeah. No,
So, the SEIS scheme is great, but it's,
it's not
that's
perfect.
a severely limiting factor. And why that's done, I can't think.
No.
Just
No,
so.
I do understand. Do you think the government could do more to sort of encourage companies to get to grow more within the UK or within their natural territory by sort of placing government contracts, giving preferences to?
No, I don't think, I think it's much better that they just change the rules.
Okay.
Like this obvious change would be on dividends,
Yeah.
and and then that would deliver what they want. If
Yeah.
the government tries to intervene
Yeah.
directly, the government used to run the car industry, the telephone industry, the electricity industry, Top tax rates in 1978 were 98%. Top rate of income tax was 83%.
Yeah.
If you had any unearned income like dividends or interest, you paid the top rate of tax of 83% plus 15% income surcharge. I mean, nobody could do anything. And the government owned all rights to all university research.
Yeah.
And they set up government bodies, like NRDC, the National Research Development Corporation. Unsurprisingly, absolutely nothing happened. Government should not get involved in stuff. They should stay out of stuff, but they
Yeah.
should set the rules. That's why the SEIS scheme is so good because they wanted to make it easier for people to start businesses, and it's absolutely worked.
Okay.
And I mean, we did last time we did a survey. The companies in which we had invested employed 85 people at the start. When we did the survey, they employed over 800 people,
Wow.
and those are good quality jobs.
Yeah.
They're paying high salaries.
Yeah.
So the amount of PAYE that the government got back every month way outweighed, the cost of the original tax relief. So that's a really good scheme, and it's kind of what the government should do. But you probably could do stuff about the FCA and the regulations. I mean, it's such a nightmare. When I'll tell you what, when we when we had the idea for the to do the SEIS fund in
Yeah.
2012, Andrea, who's my lovely partner, who's key part of what we do. Anyway, he and I went to see the FCA. And we said, listen, here's this wonderful government SEIS scheme. We'd like to, we invest in new science companies. This is perfect for that. We'd like to do a fund, and make it an official fund within the rules. And, would you support it? And they said, oh, well, no, you can do a fund. The only thing is you can only market it. You can only market it, get this, to people who have made 10 investments of the kind you want to make, i.e., investment in new science startups, per quarter for each of the last 4 quarters. And I said, what? But there's not a single person in the world who's done that. They said, oh, well, sorry, that's your problem. Those are the rules. Yeah, I mean, it's unbelievable, really unbelievable. So we had to set up our fund, without outside the FCA rules in some way. I mean, it's a sort of legal nightmare.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Okay. No, but that's interesting. But so look, I got to ask a slightly personal question, if you don't mind.
no,
You've been doing
okay.
this a long time. You seem to have the energy and commitment to keep going. What drives you now to keep doing it after
Oh,
40 odd years?
well, I mean, it is such pleasure.
Yeah.
I mean, it is so interesting. I
Yeah.
mean, every day we get approached by people who are doing interesting things.
Yeah.
They are so enthusiastic about what they do, and it's just a pleasure to invest in these businesses and to try to help them. And we have a lovely Andrea is absolutely brilliant. He reads scientific papers
Yeah.
weekends for pleasure. And when we have meetings with these scientists, they are absolutely amazed that then they say, goodness, we've talked a lot. We've never talked to investors who's actually read one of the papers, let alone come up with suggestions about. And then we have Matthias, who did his PhD in Oxford in space systems, and Asher. So there are 4 of us, and we have
Yeah.
a daily meeting at 9 o'clock in the morning, and then another one at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and we discuss everything.
Yeah.
And we spend our time talking to all the people in whom we've invested, as well as looking
Yeah.
at new companies to invest in. And I mean, it's just like the heated stretcher. I mean, I have no idea if that's going to succeed or not. But in the meanwhile, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
And I guess we don't invest in things unless we think they're going to be good for
Yeah.
humanity. I mean, it's not a written rule, but we would never invest in a cryptocurrency or a
Right.
gambling company
Yeah.
we only invest in things which are, which we think are ethically good.
Okay. And so, outside of the work for Oxford Technology, what keeps you occupied? If you've got a bit of spare time, what do you get
Oh,
up to?
Well, my my father made harpsichords
Okay.
as a hobby, and so I was brought up covered in wood shavings, and then I did my engineering apprenticeship. So I have a workshop, and I've always made I've always made things. So that's my hobby.
Okay. And you're part of is it the Silver Foundation?
Oh, the Silver Foundation,
Yeah.
yes.
You're a
Oh, the
trustee of it.
Yes, the Silver Foundation is one SYLVA.
Yeah.
That's all about wood.
Yeah.
So it's about how to grow trees, how to look after them, how to harvest them properly, how to how to turn them into product. And yeah, it's a wonder. It was set up by Martin Wood,
Yeah.
the wonderful Martin Wood, and we started off with 20 acres of land
Right.
and derelict buildings, and we planted a forest.
Wow.
And yes, I got involved at it was about whenever it was, 2010 or something,
Yeah.
when we were just starting, and we had a building to convert, a
Hmm.
big derelict farm building, very big, and the and an architect had been employed. And the cost for doing this building was going to be more than £900,000 to convert it.
Right.
And I said, no, no, that's not what we must do. What we must do is go and talk to a roofing contractor and get a quote for doing the roof, and then talk to an electrician and get a quote for doing the electrics, and then, and manage the project ourselves, which we did.
Yeah.
And when it was finished, it came in at £460,000, the bill.
Okay.
So it saved and we have teaching. So we have a big teaching barn, and we have courses in at one end just for a weekend to make a paddle.
Yeah.
We have children come on that, and also bankers who've suddenly seen the light, age 50, and want to do something more interesting, come and make a canoe paddle. And then we have all the way up to courses that last a year
Yeah.
for people who've graduated doing woodwork from a college.
Yeah.
Then they learn how to make 200 chairs as
Right.
opposed to making one chair. And making 200
Okay.
chairs is a very different thing. Anyway, no, it's a very joyous thing, the wood
Excellent.
Silver Foundation. Yeah.
Okay. Well, look, Lucius, that's a remarkable business journey you've been through, and thank you for telling us about that today. So from burgers to technology, it's a what I like is the belief in the long term, the fact that you've invested for a long term in high risk environments, but you're
Yeah.
there for long term. And I think from talking from an Oxford perspective, the importance of investing in that science base and making it more successful is not just important for those investments, but for the wider business community. So thank you very much for taking the time to tell us that story. It's a fantastic story, and I'm looking forward to distributing that to more widely within the Oxford Business Insights network. So thank you,
Is
Lucius.
it